All righty. So, welcome. And as people try to come in, we will let them in. My name is Molly Haggerty. I am a pastor at St. Peter's Lutheran Church in Middletown, PA. And I've been in this call for 3 years. So what was great is they asked me to come in actually as Alex's position to do community outreach, and then kind of slid me over to pastor about 6 months later. And then Alex joined us 2 years ago. Um, excuse me. I have 35 years experience in children, youth, and family ministry. I was a deacon before I became a pastor, and so what we're doing together, Alex and I, is kind of great because we kind of share some of the same ministries. Our church, in order to survive, it's a huge building. We actually have a historic kirk from 1767, which we still use every once in a while. And then we have this big, huge church. And so we weren't using the spaces very well. So probably about 7 years ago, we started finding community collaborators to kind of pay rent. So Women, Infant, and Children, WIC, is part of our building. And then we have a community counselor that rents space. And then we have Hope Academy PA, which is a bilingual STEAM program. And they rent space, but we also do a lot of co-ministry with them. Also, our Together programs, which Alex is a part of, leading in that, is our outreach to the community. And then we also have our faith-based stuff as well. So Alex, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Alex Mabee. I'm the coordinator of Together here at St. Peter's. And I am the formation co-op team lead. So I have been here just about 2 years. And through those 2 years, we've seen a lot of change, but also we've seen our community change. And I think that's why we entered the co-op. The co-op is really from a Lilly grant. That was given to the ELCA. And so in partnership with the Youth Ministry Network and the ELCA, it is to explore new frameworks of youth ministry in order to root young people in lifelong and transformative faith in Jesus. We believe this work is best done in collaborative community of co-learners and co-creators, sharing with and learning from each other. So the first big part of this process for us was to create a team. And we were very intentional about who was on that team. So that team consists of myself, Pastor Molly, our worship and music person, as well as one of our singers.
And admin people.
And admin people, yep. So our core staff is part of this team, as well as our council president, because we felt that our congregation, we needed the president there because we wanted the congregation to feel heard as well through this process. Part of that also is our Together, one of my staff members who is a PSU student who works for me. One of our youth from Together, so she is a sophomore in high school. So really kind of reaching into what the high schoolers want. And then one of our Together parents, because we wanted to make sure that everyone was heard on this team and everyone had a valid voice. So part of the process, there are 4 parts. The first one is listening. And in that, we listened to our congregation, both here and online, because we have both, our community that surround our building, but then also our town, our youth in our congregation youth, and then our community youth, kids that play in our parking lot, kids that are really just around our building, kids at the school, and then our youth who are our parents, because we wanted to make sure that our parents had a voice. And what they were saying doesn't always match what our youth are saying, or they're not seeing each other the same way. So part of that too is you'll notice we've changed quite a few of our spaces. So the middle picture on the left is actually a play space, that preschool to toddler play space that we've installed in our fellowship hall. So we have 3 key, 4, 3 play spaces within our church, because we feel that, no, 4
because of the
4
playground.
we have 4 we have 4. I'm sorry about that. We have 4 because we feel that children need to be accepted in those spaces. And so those are permanent spaces. We have 3 sandboxes, 1 outside and 2 inside. We're a little crazy. But then also we have our historic Keurig that for years has been used as the town's tree lighting. And so they use that as a community space to gather. And our Together program works with the mayor and the borough to put on that event. We coordinate food and things like that. And now we coordinate a carol thing at the end of the tree lighting as well. Our parking lot, which kind of started our Together program, we lack grass and lawn space. So we use our cement, and the kids actually built barriers because people drive through our parking lot and maybe not at the most safe speeds for kids. So they built barriers so that people know that they are there and that we create safe places for the kids to play.
Down on the bottom right. Oh, you're going to do it?
No,
Sorry.
you can, I forgot.
Sorry. So part of our listening was actually walking through all of our spaces and trying to figure out if they're being used to the best of their ability and if they really meet the community needs. So on the far right, we had an old library that had pastor pictures for 255 years and a bunch of old books that were very dusty. So we decided to actually take all of that down, and our Together youth actually are the kids that are boxing up the pieces, and we have created a community space called a cafe, and we held an art week so that the kids could actually like do their own portraits and kind of create that space to how they want to use it. And even in the 2 years that we have done that, 2.5 years, it's actually evolved to several different kind of expressions. So we really need to make sure that we're using all of our spaces. And currently, we're actually flip-flopping our staff offices with our community offices so that the community has the better space and that we can actually kind of like provide a food pantry and a warming and cooling center for folks, because our food pantry is kind of in the middle of everything. So we want to make sure that people have a space to be. So it's all part of the listening process.
So then next came the learning process. And through that, we have our 3 pillars of Together, in which we use for our congregation, but we also use for our after school program. Those 3 pillars are leadership, diversity and inclusion, and service. And so part of our learning from our listening was how we use our spaces and what we do in those spaces. So for our leadership, our top left corner, you'll see one of our kids from one of the refugee families that we support as a congregation. And she actually came on staff with us last summer. And here you see her leading, I believe it's a science project. It could be an art project, but she really got to learn some leadership skills. She got to interact with our community on a daily basis. And it was great because our kids, our youth that were coming in, we see about 1,000 youth through the summer. They got to get to know her, and she got ingrained into the community. Our on the right, top right is the end of our art camp, where the families were invited in at the end of art camp, and the kids got to show their expressions, whether it be their self-portraits. Some of them wrote poetry. They did all sorts of things, and they got to share that with their family. And we serve a very diverse group of kids and groups of families. So it's really important to us that when we have staff and leaders, that we show a diverse, the kids are all seen in our staff. On the bottom, you'll see one of our service projects that our kids did. Our kids led a pancake breakfast for Mardi Gras. So they learned a life skill of cooking, and maybe not cooking well right away, reading directions, things like that. But the service component was a big piece for us because the kids need to serve the community. And that was something that we learned from the PAYS report, is that the community engagement was a key piece that the kids were missing. And so we added that to our pillars. The next piece, the piece that Molly and I really enjoy, excuse me, is the experiment phase. So we've experimented quite a lot in the last 2 years with the way children are in worship, how they lead in worship. So the top right, you see one of our upper elementary students with one of our preschool students. And we integrated a children's altar with 3 little candles that can be lit by our preschoolers. They can reach it without almost lighting the altar on fire. But our upper elementary and middle school students actually work with them and are training them how to be acolytes. So bowing before they light the candles or unlight the candles. Just the how-to of being an acolyte, which is fantastic. Right below that picture, you see the playground that we implemented in worship. And when I started here, felt that the children needed to be up and close and personal to worship. So it is right up by our organ. Occasionally you'll catch a kid on Pastor Molly's lap or interrupting a sermon. Usually
To open Cheez-Its.
yeah, that was my daughter. But to sometimes to say very insightful things that they have learned during the children's sermon as well. And we encourage that. We let them be who they need to be in worship. Our after school has changed tremendously. So it has gone from starting in our parking lot, from tutoring to now this kind of community hub that we're creating in the fall. We work with Family Promise, which is a program that offers shelter to families going through homelessness. And they have a day center, but then they have host churches for a week at a time. And we work very hard to build relationships when they're there. We've changed, but the kids have free reign of our fellowship hall. So the kids can run and do art, and the parents can sit, know their kids are safe, and have some conversations if they need. We try to offer that. We try to accompany them through that process. During Lent and Advent, we have gone from just adults. We found that the little people like to join too. So we've created spaces for multi-generational small groups. So we will all be learning the same thing. The kids are just on the ground, and we created spaces with mirrors and whiteboard markers, as well as spaces where they can sit at tables and have conversation with our wisdom year people. And so they're learning from them, and our wisdom year people are learning from our littles who have to talk about their lunch or something like that. It's usually an entertaining conversation. And then we have our summer fun and lunch program with through listening from last summer, we learned that a lot of our community speaks Spanish. And so we are integrating a bilingual key component to that. So we'll have a bilingual staff person on staff every day so that kids who I cannot communicate with still feel seen and heard, and we become a brave space for them as well.
And then once a week, Hope Academy PA, which is a bilingual preschool, will provide bilingual STEAM experiments during that time.
Yep. And for our summer program, we bring in a ton of community partners, exposing the kids to different opportunities when they're older, but also different sports things, because I'm not really sports inclined. So we bring people in that can do those things.
The orange picture is us doing breakfast church, which is another way that we do worship expression. And then we set up a small table for the little people, and then people kind of that was our prayer piece. And as you can tell, we have our middle school and high schoolers kind of plan worship at least 4 times a year, more if they are willing and able. But we also do a lot of different things throughout, especially with music that happens sporadically all the time.
The next piece to the process is the evaluate piece. That's probably the hardest piece for us, besides the listening, but the evaluation is hard because it's intentional conversations, and we have chosen that those intentional conversations happen with all the groups that we've communicated with. So one of the pictures is our kiddos actually taking the cameras and sharing their story of what they'd been learning and what they had been doing, to be able to share with their family and then the community as well. We like the model of butcher paper, so we will put butcher paper down, and the kids have to run around the whole fellowship hall and answer the questions as fast as they can. It's usually like a race. And then they go back and intentionally have the conversation again. And then intentionally re-listening. So part of our re-listening is when we're teaching the kids, we give them different projects that they're doing. And so you'll see 2 of our boys with a measuring tape. We're teaching them to measure twice. So re-looking at it again and cutting once, because tools are different, supplies can be expensive. But we re-listen, we sit, and then being honest and hearing the honesty about the gaps or barriers that we don't have. So the top left picture are some of our middle schooler and high schoolers from about 3 years ago. And they've kind of disappeared on us a little bit. So we're working on, that's one of our gaps. That's one of our barriers. And how do we work to get them back? How are we meeting their needs? And it is sometimes brutally honest, and very hard to hear, but we accept it and we learn from it.
It's we have a listening coach as part of the formation co-op that she's with us for 2 years, and she's the one that's the brutally honest
Yes.
and helping us grow and expand.
Yes. So the co-op guiding principles, because God has given us all that we need to be faithful in this moment. In our work together, we adapt postures of experiment because God has given us all that we need to thrive as community. So one of those is accompaniment, and we are in this together. We believe in walking alongside people as much as we can. Through all of our community programs, we're walking alongside. Asset-based thinking and practices, we work very hard. By God's grace, we have enough, and we like to believe that it will come. So we tend to dream big and then dial down a little bit based on what we have. Curious listening. We care about each other's lives of faith. We spend a lot of time. We spend about 9 months in the listening process with our congregation, with our youth, with our community, to figure out how we meet our high schoolers, our middle schoolers, and our community where they're at and what are they needing in their faith lives, in their social and emotional. How do we meet those needs? Bold experimentation. It's probably Pastor Molly and I's favorite part of this process.
It is.
We trust God to guide us in new ways of living faithfully. So we love to try new things. We try, we fail, we laugh, we try again. And then a diverse community of co-creators. We believe that so many of us are together, and we can learn from each other. So while we are creating spaces, other people are also creating with us. That's why we have our team. And the interesting part about our team is that our core staff, church staff, are in this together with each other. And it is one of those that we love and love to see. The two pictures on the top one, you see our toddlers preschool space in our fellowship hall, which is used all summer long, and it has become a permanent part in the fellowship hall. And then the top is from summer fun as well. Drama is Pastor Molly's favorite day to come in and help. And so those are some of the expressions that the kids had for drama days.
So one of the things that we recognized pretty early on is that the majority of the kids in our community have experienced some kind of trauma. What did you say? 58%. 58% of the kids that go to our school district have free and reduced lunch, which tells us that there's some economic and hunger insecurities that go on. So the Pew Research, which they're a national research piece, and they do a lot of stuff that focuses on youth. And this is from the Connect Journal from the ELCA Youth Ministry Network. When they did their survey, they said 70% of American youth expressed depression or anxiety as a major problem. 70%, which means 3 in 4 kids that walk in here are going to have some kind of experience with emotional needs, spiritual needs that need to happen. So trauma is the body's protective response to an event or series of events that experiences as harmful or life-threatening. So it's our body's response to an event that has happened to us. And so when we have experienced trauma, our brain actually believes that it is a real response. So if you have a trigger or a memory, your body will respond as if it is actually happening to you at that moment. And that's that fight, flight, or freeze moment that we have. And so we needed to make sure that what we do in our ministry has a trauma-informed care component. And we learn this, we have actually trained the staff to do things differently. So sometimes we kind of say kids have bad behaviors. Well, we actually believe that the behavior is informing something that's happened to them. What's underneath? And how do we look at that? And then how do we accompany, walk alongside people in a different way so that it is life-giving and nurturing and part of that conversation? So first, we have to realize that kids come from a context that's very different than what many of us grew up in. Globalization, technology, these kids are experiencing trauma in a variety of different ways and are processing different than, and may not have the coping skills to do that. So we recognize that a behavior is actually a way to communicate, a way to get us going, a way for us to be seeing youth in that way. And then how do we respond? Well, we need to respond in a trauma-informed care response, which is instead of like kicking people out of the program, which I do not believe in unless they really want to go, that we keep resetting and retrying. We have a calming corner, and we talk about that with kids and what do they need. We have different ways where they can have access to staff to be able to talk through pieces, and we do a lot of integrating in our curriculum to make sure that people understand how to have coping skills in order to really be able to even be partnered with one another or create and make friendships. We also need to resist the stereotypes and actually meet people where they are at. Um, so part of what we do, a large part of what we do with all of our ministry is realizing that we are healing together, and it is biblical. Every time you look at Jesus walking alongside people, Jesus enters into the situation by listening, by deep listening, instead of telling people what to do, and then helps us discover where God is in the midst of that process. If you think of the walk to Emmaus, the last chapter in Luke, there are two disciples that are just crying from the Good Friday story because they do not understand. And Jesus walks alongside, and instead of telling them what really happened, Jesus says, well, tell me about your experience. And then they walk alongside, and Jesus starts kind of like sharing some of God's word with them. And then by the end is breaking bread with them, and they're realizing that God was with them since, from the very beginning. We also recognize that healing means accompaniment, which means we both bring stuff into our relationship. We are all broken and we come together. Sometimes when we get into helping, we think that we're okay and we're healed and we're going to only help someone else. And really, we need to change that mindset to know that each of us comes in to this with brokenness and also with gifts. So it is more equal and relationship building. We also need to make sure that we are accessible, that people, regardless of who you are, what you think or what you believe, that you have a place and a space here. We know that there are no safe spaces. There are only brave spaces. So we try really hard to be able to give people a place to be able to come to and talk, but also know that there isn't always safety because people are dealing with trauma. Um, so our Together program has had a 10-year evolution, and I think Alex referred to it earlier. When we first started, there was some kids in the parking lot who were here as refugees. And one of our members, Ellen Wollenbecker, started talking to the kids, and they said, hey, can you help us read English? And so it started as a tutoring program with people from all over the community that would come in and just read with kids. After a while, we realized that it was beyond that. And so Ellen wrote for a grant for the county prevention program, but we had to follow their curriculum very specifically. And it was an anti-bullying and anti-drug campaign. And there was a big community event at the end, and the kids did all their parts of that. But we recognized that our hands were tied a little bit, and we really couldn't get into the conversations that the kids really needed. So about 3 years ago, we read the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which is each school district does it every other year. And we recognize the needs of social emotional, finding ways to build leadership, and then serving the community. So we picked those three pillars and we started an after school program. And then we hired a curriculum developer to actually write in those three pillars for our after school program. The school district buses the kids here. We give them a snack through the food bank. And we've tried a 1 day a week, a 3 day a week, and a 5 day a week program. And after a lot of evaluation and listening, we have decided that we need to serve more people. Our summer fun program serves 1,000 kids a summer. And we recognize that that's just a really important piece because people are hungry and they need their leadership pieces. Those pillars are in there. So we are actually changing next year to do after school one time a week on Wednesday. And then we're adding a community meal.
I guess I'm getting wet.
We're adding a community meal on Tuesdays because there are 2 churches in the area that do a Monday and a Thursday, but we're going to also add a youth component to that and an educational piece that goes with that for multi-generational. And then Friday night, we're going to have a drop-in youth center, which will also be a meal. And we use the area food banks to get the food, so it doesn't cost us money, but it does cost us money for staff. Why is it? All right, sorry. So from all of our pieces, about 7 years ago, our children, youth, and family person left. And so our church kind of got really heavy into our after-school program and kind of forgot about our church side. So we started talking about what's missing and how does this this listening kind of grow deeper. And so from that, and I got here 3 years ago. I was in contact with somebody at the Penn State University on the class of aging. And so she asked if she could bring her students in and we would bring our wisdom year people, our seniors, to actually have these conversations with young adults and people in their wisdom years. And so we do 2 courses a semester, which is just amazing about how that's helped with our connections in the community. Parent Pod is Alex has a young child and she's been meeting all these parents and they find out what she does. And so now every Thursday, there's about between 8 and 15 families that show up and kind of play together and also come up with different topics. And she's building leadership with the parents because they're taking on leading the discussions and those kind of pieces. I already talked about our community meal, but we really hope that we can access things in our community meal, like English as a second language. Tree for Hope wants us to add one of those components. Maybe a women's ministry. The youth component will be there. And then how do we ask the families what they want us to offer on those Tuesday nights? In our pictures, the bottom one is our historic kirk. We lost a 300-year-old tree. So that is, we replanted a witness tree from Gettysburg. And so the community came and kind of rallied around that piece of our property. And the kids were the ones that did most of the planting, which was kind of fun. And the top picture, that is Hope Academy PA, which is our bilingual STEAM program, preschool. And they come into our Wednesday chapel. And we usually do a kids message, and then they do usually a song that they're working on. And then they go off and we continue with our worship. And we want to expand kind of some of that faith exploration with them.
So you've heard kind of about our whole process, and the process restarts. So for us, for the formation co-op, we've spent about 9 months or so in the listening and learning phase. And now that we're heading into summer, we are starting our experiment phase. So part of our experiment and part of the hard truth with our guide that we've learned is Friday night youth, how are we going to get them here? We can't just start in September and expect them to show. So our experiment for the summer is that we are creating 5 points of contact. So we're seeing the kids in 5 different places where they will be this summer and engaging them and trying to show them what we offer and then encouraging them to join us this summer or this school year and this summer for our summer fun program. But so part of that experiment will end with a big back to school bash and jam session that our band will help put on. And then at the end, we'll evaluate and we're going to look at it again and say, okay, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. At the end of each of those points of contact, we're evaluating, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's what we need to try. And the process starts all over. In the office in general, I feel that the process, we tend to do this process about every month or so. As a staff, as we're trying new things, even in worship or as we're writing different curriculums, things like that, the process just keeps restarting for us. I will point out that the bottom picture, those are 4 of our youngest members, and they we love to give them instruments at the end of worship. It's how the kids express themselves. And we've seen them grow so much in the last year. That was last Easter. And through watching them grow, we're constantly learning and we're constantly in this listening phase. And as they grow, our programs grow. And so it's been fun.
So the formation co-op process, I don't know if we explained this at the beginning or not, I cannot remember. But the ELCA got a Lilly grant, and then they gave it to the ELCA Youth Ministry Network, which works in collaboration with the ELCA, and they put out applications. So for the first portion of it, 10 churches got selected. We were one of the 10 churches, which gives us a listening coach for 2 years. And we gather once a year at the extravaganza, which is kind of like a continuing ed piece for children, youth, and family folks. And then we meet monthly with the coach, and then we also meet monthly with our team. And then this year there were, I believe, is it 15 or I think it's 15.
15.
And then the last year they'll have 30 additional ministry sites. And then what they're going to do is at the end of the 3 years, they're going to compile all the information of what we've learned, all the projects that are going on, and then we want to bring it back to our synod. So how do we then help each other kind of do this, listen, learn, experiment, evaluate, and share? And so that we can actually help each other build our youth ministry programs together. So it's just been an absolute joy to be a part of this. It's also been growing pains. There's been a little lamenting, but that's good. And we've actually having somebody that's a truth teller in the midst of your process, I think is really helpful because we only wanted to see what we were successful at. And we've really had to actually look at where our gaps are. So like even painful stuff like I was asked to step away because I've been in youth ministry for 35 years. And so it wasn't helping Alex lead. So I stepped away for a minute so that she could kind of, figure out those leadership skills with the team. And then I kind of have been added back in. And as hard as that was just really important information about learning, right? So I was over functioning. And so now what's been beautiful about that, even though it was kind of hard, we've been able to learn different ways to communicate together, and then kind of even better adjust our boundaries and with all of the staff, to have all of our staff do it. We recognized we were siloed, and now we're actually having greater conversation. I will say too, it has been interesting to have the council as part of like the second part of the process after we start experimenting. And we recognize that it usually takes about 3 council meetings of information and prayer before a decision can be made on whether we should go forward with something or not. So even though we're telling you about a lot of things that we're doing, I want you to know that there really has been a long process, and not everything is a yes. We try to say, yes, let's try. And then sometimes those efforts really need to be, I don't know, rethought for whatever reason. And so those different voices, they may be the no voices, but they're important to listen to. It helps me slow down in the process because I'm an innovator. So I slow down enough to hear the congregation. And then the process helps us to push forward so that those who usually are afraid of it, because there's fear in the midst of change, we kind of find this middle ground and hear the voices from the community. So that's in a nutshell what we have, and wanted to give you guys a little bit of time to um, oh, those are old ones, to talk about, sorry, you guys, talk about questions you might have. Um, oh, we did this quick.
I
Question for you.
wanted to thank you, but go ahead. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, first, thank you. I mean, it's an incredible program that you've got going. I guess my question is for those of us who are in our infancy with things like that, what did it look like in the beginning and how did you get it started?
Honestly, our Together program started with 3 kids playing in the parking lot, and adults just walking up and saying, "Hi, who are you? What you doing?" Right? And just kind of having those conversations and building the relationships. And then by the kids asking, for tutoring, then it kind of said, "Oh, okay, well, we can get a bunch of people." And so that one person got 5 people from 3 different churches to show up after school, worked with the school to kind of get busing and that kind of thing. So that is actually how our community outreach started. So organic. And I think from that, because we're kind of taking over what somebody else gave us, which is pretty beautiful. But we have actually tried a whole bunch of new initiatives by going and talking. The school district has been essential. So social workers in the school district, what are the needs, right? Principals, you went to the assistant superintendent. And then the free lunch program was fantastic because we hit a part of the neighborhood that the school districts were not providing over the summer. So they tried to have, they have 4 feeding locations and we are one of them. So really it started really small, Joe, really small.
I think too, like for us every year, the summer program is a springboard for some of the kids into our fall programming. So like last year we saw a lot of registration come in towards the end of summer because our summer kids were going, hey, I want to be here. They were seeing that we were creating brave spaces. So I would say even starting off something small like that, where you then get your springboard into your other things, is kind of helpful. Because that really did help us then this year springboard into like our 5 days a week. And those kids that were here consistently were our summer kids.
And if you're talking about church kids, because a lot of these are the community kids, our church program was not great. When I got here 3 years ago, there were only 3 kids in worship. Now there's 15. And then there are about 5 middle school and high schoolers inside. So we have found that we had to kind of ask them what they wanted to do. So confirmation was painful. So I got 2 of our fishermen in the congregation to get us kayaks, and we went kayaking on the Susquehanna. And then we stopped for lunch at the pavilion and then had our faith conversations. So I had to kind of break into where they were at. We do show up at their plays, at their soccer games. And then we also invite them to create parts of worship. We try to do it. Well, I would love to do it every month, but they're a little leery. So probably at least 4 or 5 times a year, they kind of come up with creative ways to kind of be in worship. And then Alex is going to try a new format with them so that every month they're doing like a part of the prayers so that they have a purpose to be here. And I think the youth gathering is going to help at least pull those other folks in. And one of them that's going on to the gathering is going to be at the college that's in town. So the other piece too is we do a lot of collaborative with other churches. So when I first got here, the 2 churches that were down the road, we did our confirmation together. And then all the kids graduated. So we kind of have this little gap in between. But I think too, especially with the kids planning and then the kids hosting, then they bring their friends because they don't want to be alone. I think that's a
big thing. Yep. So
I hope that answered.
I have a question. I like the idea of starting with the parking lot, sort of. And you said you created like a barrier so that there'd be an area where, where they could, I guess, could play and do things. We have a little basketball hoop. That's all we have there right now. But I thought that was kind of a neat idea. So, and this might sound like a stupid question, but are there any insurance problems with that? Like, does your basic church insurance, because you're talking about people outside of your church?
Right. Yes, actually I did ask, and they said as long as we had like it marked off. So what we did is we went to Home Depot because I love the color orange, as you can see in my office. And so we got Home Depot pails and we put a 2x4 in there. And then we got the orange netting, the winter fences you see in Wisconsin all the time. And we put hooks on them so that we actually extended part of the parking lot. And then we actually, there's a lot of people in the neighborhood that park in our parking lot. So we put little things, hey, this is what's going to be happening. And these are the days that, the fencing goes up. And so it was because we have a basketball hoop as well. And our insurance said it was okay.
they also we have signed liability waivers on all the kids as well. We did not last summer. We will this summer.
We learned.
We learned. We learned. But we do, even for after school kids, we get all of our liability signed so that that was part of what the insurance wanted us to do, is make sure that we did have those forms signed with medical information if something were to happen.
Okay.
And
And then
our,
what type of things besides the basketball hoop, what type of things were happening in that area?
So we, during our summer and fall, usually, we have, 2 active water tables that are out. We have, basketball, soccer, tennis,
sidewalk chalk.
sidewalk chalk. The kids play like group games. We do bike safety, once a year, outside, and we use the whole parking lot for bike safety. So the whole parking lot gets cleared out for bike safety.
Bring in the police officers.
Yep, we
to
bring
do
in the
that.
police officers. This year we're gonna have, probably the Army is gonna come in and bring up some really cool things that the kids are gonna get to do some PT type stuff with them. So that's gonna be really cool. State police is gonna come. So we try to do it so that we have community involvement in those pieces. And some days the kids are running around playing tag, and there's balls flying because we've got kids playing basketball and we've got kids playing tag, and I hand out a bazillion Band-Aids and we call it a good summer.
We also, because the summer reading program, we've invited the library to come in on Wednesdays. So all their performers come into the lunch program on Wednesdays. And that also helps. So the reading theme, like the summer reading program, is our theme for each week. So the nice thing is we're kind of built into a community theme, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to.
Yep. This year's theme is adventure, so we're doing summer camp.
She's building a cave out of paper.
We are building a
Excuse
cave.
me, that's right. I'm gonna get the chicken wire out. Did that answer your question, Sue?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
I don't want to hog up the questions, but I had like 2 others actually.
Awesome.
What is your breakfast church? You just slid by it real quick. You mentioned it and slid by it.
I love breakfast church. So basically we go into fellowship hall around round tables, and so our hospitality people create a breakfast, and then on each table we have a little loaf of bread and then the communion wine in little carafes. And so we actually worship around the table. And then instead of me preaching, I have reflection questions that are based on the scripture for the day, and our band plays in there. And what's great is the kids have their little table that they love, and then people just can gather together, and it's very informal. And what we have found is, so people come in, we pray right away, they grab their food, and then as they're eating, we start doing worship. And then in the middle, when it's time for communion, they actually commune at their table and feed each other communion. So it's kind of fun. And we always have it interactive, because Alex and I both like doing art. But then like the prayers of the people, they start doing their prayers at one part. So then that's what we can read during the prayers of the people. And there's dinner church models, and I've been a part of that for years. And so I just brought it here, and actually the congregation is asking for it more often now.
And our littles really enjoy it too. Part of what we do with our youth is, if we have older youth, we try to put them with the littles at the table, and so that they facilitate communion for our littles. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's me. But it is nice when we have some of our older youth to sit down and have them interacting with our littles, kind of teaching them communion.
Yeah, we're going to try a dinner church program. That's why I was just interested in what your breakfast church was.
Yep. So instead of worship in the sanctuary, it's in the fellowship hall.
Yeah. How often do you do that?
Now it's about 4 times a year. It started out as once a year, and they love it that much. So just great. I did not expect that.
Yes.
I think it sounds wonderful.
Did you have
And
another?
then I have one other little simple question. I liked your idea of the butcher paper, and you ask questions, but that wasn't enough information. Like, can you explain what you did with that activity?
So we usually do it twice a year at our after school program. We do it several times through the summer, but we do our fun, safety, and respect. And so on one, they have their fun. And so the question is, what do you want to do that is fun to you? Like what brings you joy? And then another one is, how do you feel respected and how do you respect others? And another one is, how do we keep each other safe? Right? Because in order to be in those spaces, and then there's questions of what's your favorite ice cream and what's your favorite Disney character? Because I'm Disney obsessed. And then what's your favorite sport? And they literally, we have them all over the gym, fellowship hall, sorry, all over. And the kids then take their marker and we play a song and they have to go to all the things. And so they have like half the song and we pause it and they switch. And so the goal is to get to every question and then we sit down and we're like, okay, for me, I play it with guess whose favorite Disney character this is, right? And we read it off and, oh, I think that's so and so's, or
Well, yeah.
so that you're getting to know the kids, but also the kids are then learning what it means to be safe in our environments and how we be safe with each other, how we respect the staff and how they want to be respected, because we believe in giving the kids the voice and they know what they need. And so how do we get that out of them? And that's the best way we have found for our youth, because they're not going to sit there and talk to each other.
Right. And we use it as an evaluation technique as well. So we can ask also some questions about, what did you learn during our thing on Diwali? You know what I mean? So that they can actually start, we need to see how much they've really taken in. We also do this model during like our congregational meetings now, because we do breakfast church for our 2 congregational meetings a year. And so we will have reflection questions written down on a piece of paper instead of the butcher paper. We'll put the butcher paper on the kids. But then that way we're actually getting feedback. So our listening sessions can go a lot shorter, and then we compile them all and we type them all up so that we can actually see what everybody has said. So we use that kind of model for, I would say, multi-generational purposes. But it really gives you a lot of information, more than you want.
But we do not make our wisdom year people walk around Luther Hall.
Yeah, they get kind of grumpy at me.
They do.
Charlie, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that for the other folks on the call, that what's been great to watch, and I've been in conversation with folks that are involved in this ministry for the entire 10 years it's been happening, and what Molly and Alex have said, but maybe not emphatically enough, is how often they've been willing to take a chance and try something and it didn't work. And I think one of the challenges in youth and family and congregations, when I'm consulting with them, don't realize this, is it's okay to not have everything work out. You know what I mean? Like you're going to try things that don't always go quite the way you planned, and then adjusting and listening to the Spirit and being open to how things might change and evolve as a result of that is really important. And they've done this really, really well. And it's one of the reasons that I think this ministry is succeeding on the level that it is. And then the other piece of that is, and this is really attributable to both of them, but Molly in particular, you've got to get this to be a kind of missional priority for your whole congregation. In other words, you've got to get everyone to say, yeah, we're in this together, right? Because it's not as simple as just like 3 people from the congregation going, we're going to go out in the parking lot and hang with the kids. Yes, that's a starting point. But when you get to the place where you're making the kind of change that is as important as the change that you guys are making right now, it comes because the whole congregation's bought in. So,
And
at least trying. Yeah.
And thank you for that, Charlie. And it does take a lot of, I'm going to say, prayer and a lot of conversation. And when I hear a lot of pushback, it means that we need to have different conversations. It means that I need to ask the staff, we need to ask different questions, and then we bring it back together. And if people are still resistant, especially like on council, then we know that we're not ready yet. Like it took probably 9 months to get a playground in our worship space.
But I will tell you that some of our wisdom year members will tell you that they don't know, they love the playground. And that was something I really pushed for because I have a young child and I need her to be in worship and believe that that's where she belongs. But it took a while, and now my daughter goes up and goes to our wisdom year people and sits with them and has conversations, and they don't know how they worshiped without them making their little block towers or sitting with them, because it's ingrained now into our congregation and our congregational life.
I also think it has helped when people come visit the church, even during funerals especially, and I show them the playground and the kids are playing in that space. It has really made a huge difference for invitation. So,
Yeah.
well, I know that it is 12:20 and we have 9 minutes now before we have to get to our next bigger piece. Do you guys have anything else?
Just thanks to you both.
Yeah,
Well,
thank
thanks
you.
for
Yeah,
listening and joining.
Wonderful ideas. One other real quick thing. Well, we're a very small church, so we couldn't begin to do all the stuff you've done, but you've given me some good ideas. But one of the things I was interested in, we have, a educational building that at one time we used extensively. And of course, now we are such a small, mostly elderly congregation, which I think there's a lot of churches, small churches around that are that way. I was very intrigued with the idea of you having, like you said, you had a women infant program or in part of your building.
Yep.
I'm just kind of curious, how did you, so you lease out some of the space, but how did you attract people to use that space, I guess I would say?
It was actually the person who started the Together program, Ellen, was one of our kind of staple members. And she was just like, that tithing is not the same as it used to be. Don't have as many members. And so she just started looking at spaces and then going and knocking on doors. But if you remember, we had a county grant that we were using. And so it was through that county grant that she ran into, it was through Hamilton Health, and WIC is there. And so she started conversations. So the community counselor is somebody in our neighborhood, and they wanted to start their own private practice. And we had heard through the grapevine. So we just started knocking on doors. We had a preschool, but when Hope Academy, which is the Synod mission program, we do a lot of stuff in Guatemala with them. When they wanted to start here stateside, I was like, I want you here, and we actually are getting more money because they have more revenue because they're going to serve more people. So, and then the counselor that's here knows a massage therapist that wants to start. So we're going to try to rent out to them. So a lot of it's become word of mouth, Sue. So figure out who is close by. You could also call a commercial realtor and they can come look at your space and kind of help you with rent prices. And that might be your first best bet. And also look at the other churches that are around you that are small. And are there things that you guys want to do together? So
I think too, some of my biggest, where I get most of my information from is the school principals and the school district, even just having conversations with them, because they'll know what's going on, who's looking for space, might even be able to point you in the direction of parents. I spend a lot of time in communication with the principals and the school district for many reasons, but one of them is they've got their pulse on the community, sometimes more than we do, and that's really helpful too.
Thank you.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, thanks, Sue. We hope you have something to take back. Feel free to call us if you ever need, or if you want to come see our crazy program. We're always welcome to take people
I
on.
think I'd like to. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So at St. Peter's Lutheran in Middletown, we should be on I think the Synod website.
I already looked you up in Google while you were talking.
Oh, you did? Okay, that's great. Yeah, and you can reach out to Alex or I. I mean, we do a lot of things in collaboration. We're kind of a unit.
We are.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
you.
Have a great day.